Picture this. It's 1348, and you wake up to the sound of church bells. Not calling people to prayer, but announcing the dead. You step outside your cottage in London, and the stench hits you like a physical blow. Sweet, sickly, unmistakable. Death has moved into your neighborhood, and it's not planning to leave anytime soon. Your neighbor Thomas was laughing at yesterday's market, haggling over the price of bread. This morning, his wife is dragging his swollen, blackened corpse to the growing pile behind the church. The disease that's sweeping across Europe doesn't knock. It kicks down doors, slaughters entire families, and leaves towns as silent as graveyards. But here's what you don't know yet. The thing you're about to try to save your life will probably kill you faster than the plague itself. Welcome to the Black Death, where medicine is poison, prayers become curses, and your desperate attempts at survival might be signing your own death warrant. You're standing in your cottage, watching black boils the size of apples grow on your arm, and you know you need help, fast. So you do what every terrified person in 1348 does. You run to the only doctor left alive in your village. Dr. Aldrich greets you with confidence, his leather plague mask making him look like a demonic bird. He's survived this long, so he must know something, right? Wrong. He's about to demonstrate why medieval doctors had a lower survival rate than their patients. He examines your swellings with scholarly authority and announces his diagnosis. Your humors are corrupted. We must purge the poison from your blood. He actually believes this will save you. First comes the bloodletting. He slices open your already weakened arm and watches your life force pour into a bowl, convinced he's draining away disease instead of draining away your last chance of survival. But that's just the warm-up. Next, he produces a bottle of mercury, liquid death disguised as healing. Drink this, he commands. It will purge the corruption. You swallow the metallic poison that burns through your throat like molten silver. Within hours, you'll be vomiting blood, but the doctor will call this progress. Then comes the hot iron poker, glowing red hot, pressed against your plague boils. The sizzle of burning flesh fills the air with smoke and screams. We must burn out the poison, he explains, as your skin melts and your consciousness fades. If you somehow survive the doctor's help, the church offers its own brand of salvation. Now that the doctor has nearly killed you with kindness, you turn to the only institution left standing, the church. Surely God will protect the faithful, right? You crawl to the cathedral, past the bodies stacked like cordwood, seeking divine intervention. Father Benedict stands before his dwindling congregation, brandishing a leather whip embedded with metal barbs. The plague is God's punishment for our sins, he roars. We must flagellate ourselves to earn forgiveness. And the crowd actually believes him. You watch in horror as dozens of villagers strip to the waist and begin whipping themselves into bloody submission. The church floor becomes slick with blood, yet they continue, convinced that each laceration brings them closer to salvation. Then come the flagellant processions, organized mobs of self-mutilating fanatics who march from town to town, spreading blood, chaos, and unknowingly, the plague itself. They believe their suffering will appease God's wrath, but they're actually creating perfect conditions for disease transmission. The church offers another solution: pilgrimage. Journey to holy sites, they proclaim, and God will cleanse you. So you join thousands of infected, desperate souls traveling in cramped conditions, sharing food, water, and the very disease you're trying to escape. Every prayer circle becomes a transmission hub, every communion cup a vessel of death, and every act of religious devotion a step closer to the grave. With holy salvation proving deadlier than the disease, you turn to the shadowy world of medieval alchemy. You stumble into an apothecary's shop that reeks of sulfur, rotting herbs, and desperation. The walls are lined with jars containing unidentifiable floating objects that might once have been organs. Master Willem the apothecary greets you with wild eyes and trembling hands. Half his fingers are missing, not from the plague, but from his own experimental remedies. I have the cure, he whispers, producing a bottle of liquid that seems to writhe with its own malevolent life. Powdered unicorn horn mixed with ground emeralds, he explains proudly. What he doesn't mention is that unicorn horn is actually narwhal tusk scraped with a rusty knife, and the emeralds are crushed green glass that will shred your insides like microscopic razors. He offers you another option, theriac, a universal antidote containing 64 rare ingredients, including viper's flesh and opium. The reality: it's a random mixture of whatever he found in his backyard, fermented until it achieved the consistency and smell of liquid death. The popular belief was that bad air caused the plague, so people carried posies of flowers, thinking pleasant smells would protect them. Others believed that loud noises scared away disease, so they rang bells constantly, creating a cacophony that drove entire towns to madness. But the most dangerous folk remedy involved something truly revolting. You've survived poisonous medicine and deadly prayers. Now comes the most humiliating chapter of plague survival: medieval bathroom science. Medieval doctors believed they could diagnose and cure plague by examining your most intimate bodily productions. And yes, it gets exactly as disgusting as you're imagining. Dr. Malpractice examines your urine with the intensity of a scholar studying ancient texts. "Too yellow," he pronounces gravely. "We must balance your humors." His solution? A cocktail of crushed beetles mixed with your own filtered waste, because apparently medieval medicine believed in recycling. He studies your excrement like a fortune teller reading tea leaves, searching for signs of corrupt matter. His prescription? Eating clay mixed with ground pearls to purify your bowels. The result? Intestinal blockage so severe that the plague becomes the least of your problems. The trendy cure of the day involved bathing in human urine, preferably your own. But in desperate times, any would do. Plague sufferers would soak in tubs of fermenting waste, convinced that external application would draw out internal corruption. Medieval enemas were the final frontier of bathroom medicine. Toxic mixtures pumped into weakened bodies until patients died from the cure long before the disease could finish them. With your body thoroughly poisoned by medical intervention, you try the one thing that actually makes sense, avoiding other people. But even isolation becomes deadly in medieval times. You decide to flee the city, joining the thousands of others with the same brilliant idea. The roads become rivers of humanity, all fleeing in the same direction, sharing water sources, food supplies, and unknowingly, their infections. Every inn becomes a plague house, every river crossing a transmission point, and every safe destination becomes the next outbreak center. When everyone has the same survival plan, that plan becomes a guided tour of death. You finally reach a remote mountain cabin, far from any human contact. But now you face starvation, exposure, and the gradual realization that humans aren't designed to survive alone. Your mind begins to fracture from isolation, and you start hearing voices that definitely aren't there. The return journey proves even deadlier than the escape. Thinking money can buy safety, you attempt to purchase your way out of death's reach. Gold can't cure plague, but it can certainly accelerate your demise through premium stupidity. You hire the most expensive doctor in London, a man whose confidence is matched only by his incompetence. He prescribes ground pearls mixed with gold dust, because obviously, expensive ingredients must be more effective than cheap ones. Rich plague victims could afford imported medicines from distant lands, exotic poisons that poor people couldn't access, Chinese mercury, Arabian lead compounds, and Indian arsenic preparations that killed faster and more expensively than local remedies. But the deadliest luxury wasn't foreign medicine. It was domestic help. You hire additional servants to care for you, unknowingly importing the plague directly into your household. Every new employee becomes a potential vector, every act of service a transmission opportunity. When medicine fails and prayer disappoints, desperate minds turn to darker explanations. And in medieval Europe, that means finding someone to blame and kill. You join the mob gathering in the town square, listening to Brother Marcus explain the real cause of the plague. Thomas the blacksmith stands on a wooden crate, pointing at the Jewish quarter. "They poisoned our wells," he screams. "The plague is their weapon against good Christians." The crowd roars approval, and you watch neighbors transform into a lynch mob before your eyes. Because when death seems random, People desperately need someone to blame. Local authorities, rather than stopping the violence, often encourage it. They'd rather have citizens blame minorities than question their own complete failure to address the crisis. Entire Jewish communities are burned alive while the real plague spreads unchecked through the rioting crowds. People blame foreigners, witches, and even cats, leading to mass cat exterminations that remove the only effective plague control from medieval cities. Every scapegoat identified makes the actual problem worse. With human enemies identified and eliminated, you turn your attention to the invisible killer, bad air. Medieval people believed disease traveled through smell, leading to some fragrant but fatal solutions. You strap flowers to your face, creating a bouquet mask that's supposed to filter out corrupted air. The reality? You're creating perfect breeding conditions for bacteria right next to your breathing passages. Plague doctors develop elaborate beak-like masks stuffed with herbs, spices, and aromatic substances. But these masks don't filter anything. They just make doctors look like demonic birds while providing zero protection against airborne disease. Some believed that bad smells could overpower worse smells, leading to the practice of carrying rotting meat or human waste as protective amulets. The logic? If plague comes from bad air, maybe worse air will scare it away. People burn enormous fires of green wood, sulfur, and animal dung, believing the smoke will purify the air. Instead, they're creating toxic gas clouds that kill through suffocation long before the plague gets a chance. When every earthly remedy fails, you turn to increasingly extreme religious solutions. And medieval Christianity offers some truly creative ways to die in God's name. You join the Children's Crusade, a mob of desperate miners convinced that their innocence will protect them from divine wrath. What actually happens is that you're creating a traveling plague incubator, staffed entirely by people too young to understand basic hygiene. Brother Mortificatus preaches that the plague is God's test of faith. Fast until death, he commands his followers. Show God your devotion by rejecting earthly sustenance. The monks actually obey, weakening their immune systems until the plague becomes a mercy killing. The Church institutes mandatory fasting for entire communities, believing that collective suffering will appease divine anger. Weakened, malnourished populations become perfect plague victims. But the Church calls this spiritual preparation for the afterlife. Thinking there's safety in numbers, you join massive prayer gatherings where hundreds of plague refugees beg God for mercy. These become super-spreader events that would make modern epidemiologists weep. Every church service becomes a disease distribution center. But people keep coming, convinced that their faith will protect them even as they watch fellow worshipers collapse during communion. Packed congregations sharing prayer books, communion cups, and the same recycled air create ideal conditions for disease transmission. Yet attendance actually increases as the death toll rises, because desperate people interpret survival as divine favor rather than dumb luck. Pilgrimage sites become plague festivals where infected travelers from across Europe converge in cramped conditions. Every holy relic kissed, every shrine touched, and every sacred pool shared becomes a transmission point that sends pilgrims home carrying death to their families. When every remedy fails and death claims everyone around you, there's one last option that sounds absolutely brilliant until you try it: faking your own death. You've watched the death carts roll through your neighborhood every morning, collecting bodies like a macabre delivery service. Master Geoffrey the baker tried this exact plan, covered himself in ash, slowed his breathing, and joined the pile of corpses waiting for burial. What he didn't account for was that medieval burial practices aren't particularly concerned with confirming death. When people are dying faster than you can count them, quality control becomes a luxury no one can afford. You smear yourself with convincing gore, practice holding your breath, and wait for the death cart. But medieval gravediggers aren't medical professionals. They're just trying to dispose of bodies before they create bigger problems. They toss you into a plague pit with dozens of actual corpses, some still twitching, and begin shoveling dirt over the entire pile. Your brilliant escape plan has just buried you alive with the very people you were trying to avoid. Congratulations. You've survived medicine that tried to kill you, religion that nearly buried you, and remedies that defied logic. But surviving the Black Death means inheriting a world that no longer makes sense. You crawl out of your hiding place to find entire cities abandoned, your footsteps echoing through empty streets where only rats dare to venture. Crops rot in fields, filling the air with the sweet, sick smell of fermentation mixed with decay. And the few survivors so traumatized they've forgotten how civilization works. Empty houses stand with doors wide open, creaking in wind that carries the whispers of ghosts, meals still on tables where flies have built kingdoms on moldering bread. But touching those abandoned belongings might mean contracting the disease from surfaces where it's been waiting patiently for new victims. The silence is the worst part. A quiet so complete, it makes you question whether you're actually alive or just another ghost haunting empty streets. You have unlimited wealth because money from dead people is just lying around, but nothing to buy because all the merchants, farmers, and craftsmen are dead. Food rots in storehouses while survivors starve. The irony so bitter you can taste it on your tongue. The few people left alive have seen things that shattered their minds. Children who watched their entire families die in days, their eyes now holding the vacant stare of adults who've seen too much. Priests who gave last rites to entire congregations, and doctors who realized their medicine killed more people than it saved. Those elaborate survival strategies, the bloodletting, the prayers, the folk remedies, the isolation, the conspiracies, none of them mattered. Survival was pure random chance, and realizing that breaks something fundamental in the human need to believe that actions have consequences. The knowledge that everything you tried was meaningless, that everyone you loved died randomly, and that you survived for no reason at all, becomes a weight that presses down on your chest with every breath, making the simple act of living feel like betrayal. The Black Death taught Europe one brutal lesson. When nature decides to kill you, your best efforts often just speed up the process. The real survivors weren't the ones with the best remedies, the strongest faith, or the most elaborate plans. They were simply the unlucky few who had to live with the knowledge that, in the face of true catastrophe, human civilization is just a thin mask over chaos. Remember, sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is try to survive.